Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The intergalactic medical station known as Infinite Mercy had a reputation that stretched across 8 sectors, and that reputation was simple. If you were dying, this was where you came to stop doing that. The station orbited the neutral planet Bryn Hala, like a gleaming monument to medical excellence, its corridors packed with the galaxy's finest physicians, its equipment calibrated to treat everything from Voltaxian-scale rot to Plutonian nerve collapse. The waiting room alone could accommodate 50 different atmospheric requirements simultaneously, which was either impressive or deeply depressing depending on how long you'd been sitting there. On this particular morning, morning by station time, since space didn't really care about circadian rhythms, the main medical bay was experiencing what the staff politely called a routine influx and what everyone else called complete chaos. A Ganari trader was complaining about his third arm falling asleep. 2 Bolvaxian tourists were arguing about who had food poisoning first, and in the corner, a small creature that looked like a very angry pine cone was making sounds that suggested it had opinions about the waiting time. Then the emergency doors exploded open, and everything got significantly worse. "Coming through! Coming through!" shouted a Mexorian cargo worker, his 4 arms struggling to support the stretcher he was hauling. Behind him, 3 more crew members rushed in, all of them wearing expressions that suggested they'd recently witnessed something their therapy bills would never recover from. "We need a doctor. We need every doctor. We need—" "Oh hell, is he still talking?" On the stretcher, impaled through the abdomen by approximately 3 feet of metal beam, was a human. And yes, he was still talking. "I'm just saying," the human muttered, his voice strained but somehow maintaining a conversational tone. "The insurance company is going to have a field day with this one. Do you think cargo accidents count as acts of the universe? Or do I need to file this under workplace hazards? Because the paperwork is very different." "Sir, please stop talking and focus on not dying," one of the Mexorian crew members pleaded. "I'm multitasking," the human replied. Dr. Halminox, who had been treating the granary's arm situation, immediately abandoned his patient and rushed toward the commotion. Halminox was an insectoid physician from the hive worlds, standing roughly 6 feet tall with chitinous plating that gleamed under the medical bay's harsh lights. His 6 limbs moved with practiced precision, 2 holding diagnostic tools, 2 gesturing at his staff, and 2 currently expressing what could only be described as medical horror. "Get him to operating bay 3 now." Halminox's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress that his colleagues had learned to recognize. "Bupix, prep the emergency surgical suite. I need tissue regenerators, a full blood supply." "What species is this? Terran? Someone find me the Terran protocols." Nurse Bupix, a translucent purple blob of sentient gelatin, quivered with anxiety as she rolled toward the supply cabinets. Her species communicated through color shifts and vibrations, and right now she was flashing a shade of lavender that roughly translated to, "Oh no, oh no, oh no." The cargo crew transferred the human, beam and all, onto the operating table with the kind of care usually reserved for live explosives. The metal pole protruding from his body created a logistical nightmare, and Halminox was already calculating angles, blood loss, organ damage, probability of survival. "All right, sir, I need you to remain calm," Halminox began, his voice shifting into the soothing tone he used for critical patients. "We're going to take excellent care of you. Can you tell me your name?" "Thorn," the human said, then winced. "And I am calm. This is my calm face. You should see me when I'm actually worried. Thorn? Good. Thorn, I'm Dr. Halminox, and I'm going to do everything in my power to save my life, stabilize my condition, probably lecture me about safety regulations? Thorn interrupted. Yeah, I've heard the speech. No offense, Doctor, but this isn't my first time being impaled. Halminox's antennae twitched. I'm sorry, did you just say this isn't your first? Third time, actually, Thorn said, almost cheerfully despite the obvious pain. Fourth, if you count the incident with the ice pick, but that was more of a stabbing than an impaling. There's a technical difference. Boopix returned with the bioscanner, a sleek device that looked like someone had crossbred a tablet with a mood ring. She pressed it gently against Thorn's chest, careful to avoid the whole metal beam through the torso situation. The device hummed, lights flickering across its surface as it compiled data. Then it made a sound that medical equipment should never make. A confused, stuttering beep that suggested the machine itself was having an existential crisis. Halminox leaned over to read the display, and his compound eyes widened. That can't be right. What's wrong? One of the Mexorian crew members asked, still hovering nervously near the door. The scanner is reporting cellular regeneration, Halminox said slowly, as if speaking the words carefully might make them make sense. Active, ongoing cellular regeneration. That's impossible. The trauma is too severe, too recent. The body shouldn't even be attempting to heal yet, let alone succeeding. Thorn raised his head slightly, which took more effort than he'd like. Oh, is that the thing where it says my cells are doing weird stuff? Yeah, I get that a lot. You get that? Halminox's mandibles clicked in rapid-fire succession. Boopix, recalibrate the scanner. This has to be a malfunction. Boopix rippled with nervous energy, but complied, running the diagnostic sequence. The machine beeped cheerfully, displaying a message that translated roughly to, "Working perfectly, thanks for asking." "Run it again," Halminox ordered. They ran it again. Same results. Cellular regeneration, happening in real time, at a speed that violated approximately 15 different laws of biology. "Bring me the backup scanner," Halminox said, his voice taking on an edge that his staff recognized as the doctor's "I will not be made a fool of by my own equipment" tone. They brought the backup scanner. It said the same thing. They brought a third scanner, this one a top-of-the-line model that cost more than a small spacecraft. It looked at Thorn, looked at the other scanners, and essentially said, "Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, but the human's definitely healing himself." "This is unprecedented," Halminox muttered, now circling the operating table like a predator studying unusual prey. "I've been practicing medicine for 23 years. I've treated over 600 species. I've never seen anything like this." "Do I get a prize?" Thorn asked weakly. "You get to explain to me how you're not dead," Halminox retorted, then immediately softened his tone. Bedside manner, even in the face of biological impossibility. "I apologize. That was unprofessional. But, Thorn, I need you to understand. What I'm seeing here should not be happening. Your body is regenerating tissue at a rate that exceeds our most advanced medical technology." "Humans do that," Thorn said with a shrug, then regretted the shrug because moving was a bad idea. "It's kind of our thing. Well, one of our things. We also make decent coffee and have an inexplicable fondness for keeping apex predators as pets." Halminox wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the wound, watching with the fascinated horror of a scientist witnessing their entire understanding of biology crumble in real time. The tissue around the metal beam was definitely regenerating. Slowly, yes, but visibly. Cell by cell, The human's body was knitting itself back together around the foreign object. "I need to document this," Helminox said, his voice distant. "Bupix, start recording. Visual, biometric, everything. And someone get me Administrator Ormbathu. He needs to see this." "Is that really necessary?" Thorn groaned. "I'm already going to be late for my next cargo run. If we can just yank this thing out and slap a bandage on it—" "Absolutely not!" Helminox's voice rose 3 octaves. "We are not yanking anything. We are carefully extracting the foreign object in a controlled surgical environment while monitoring your impossibly rapid cellular regeneration." "You say impossible. I say Tuesday," Thorn muttered. "It's not Tuesday." Bupix vibrated helpfully, her colors shifting to a calming blue. "It's always Tuesday somewhere," Thorn replied, which was both philosophically interesting and medically irrelevant. Administrator Ormbathu arrived within minutes, his scales clicking against the polished floor as he slithered into the operating bay. Ormbathu was a reptilian from the bureaucratic class of his species, which meant he had evolved specifically to make everyone else's life more complicated. He wore the standard administrator's uniform, which somehow made him look even more official and therefore even more annoying. "Dr. Helminox, I received your urgent summons," Ormbathu said, his forked tongue tasting the air. "I was in the middle of a very important budget meeting. This had better be worth—" He stopped, finally looking at the human on the table. "By the infinite void, is that a support beam?" "Yes," Helminox said curtly, "but that's not why I called you. Look at the bioscanner readings." Ormbathu leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he processed the data. His scales rippled, a physiological response to confusion. "This says the patient is healing, while impaled. That's not possible." "And yet," Helminox gestured at Thorn, who waggled his fingers in a weak greeting. "What species is this?" Ormbathu demanded. "Human. Terran." "Terrans aren't known for advanced regeneration. Their medical database lists them as standard carbon-based biologicals with average healing capabilities." "Well, their medical database is either outdated or lying," Helminox snapped. "Because I'm watching impossible cellular regeneration happening right in front of me, and unless we're all experiencing a shared hallucination, this human is healing from catastrophic trauma without medical intervention." Ormbathu's tongue flicked rapidly, another sign of agitation. "This requires investigation, full medical workup. I want every test we have available, blood work, tissue samples, genetic sequencing." "I'm right here, you know," Thorn interjected. "Still conscious, still able to hear you planning to turn me into a science project." "You'll be compensated for your time," Ormbathu said smoothly, in the tone of someone who had no intention of compensating anyone for anything. "How about you compensate me by removing the metal from my internal organs?" Thorn suggested. Helminox nodded. "He has a point. We need to extract the beam first, stabilize the patient. Then we can investigate." He paused, looking at the readings again. "Though at this rate, if we wait another hour, he might heal around it entirely." "That would be uncomfortable," Thorn said. "Let's not do that." The surgical extraction took 90 minutes, which was approximately 85 minutes longer than it should have taken, because Helminox kept stopping to take readings, measurements, and samples. Every time he made an incision to access the beam, the tissue would start closing before he could complete the procedure. It was like performing surgery on a patient who was actively working against him. Except the patient wasn't doing anything except lying there making sarcastic comments about the ceiling tiles. "How do you even function like this?" Helminox muttered at one point, carefully cutting through regenerating tissue for the third time. "Very well, usually," Thorn replied, "though I'm starting to think I should have just waited for it to push itself out naturally. That's happened before." The beam was going to push itself out? Bodies don't like foreign objects. Eventually, they reject them. Mine just do it faster than most. When they finally extracted the beam, a piece of reinforced titanium alloy that had somehow missed every major organ through sheer dumb luck, the wound began closing immediately. Not in hours, not in days. Immediately. HumanException watched, instruments forgotten, as the human's abdomen sealed itself like a time-lapse video of plant growth. "Bupix, are you seeing this?" he whispered. Bupix had turned a shade of purple that didn't have a direct translation, but essentially meant, "I'm going to need therapy after this shift." Within 30 minutes, the wound was gone. Not healed, gone. A thin pink line remained where the beam had been, but it was already fading. In another hour, Thorn would have no visible sign of injury beyond the dried blood on his skin. "This is impossible," HumanException said for what might have been the 100th time. "You keep using that word," Thorn said, sitting up and stretching. "I don't think it means what you think it means. Pretty sure anything that happens is, by definition, possible. Don't quote ancient Earth entertainment at me while violating the laws of biology," HumanException snapped. Outside the operating bay, a crowd had gathered. Medical students, curious staff members, even some patients who'd heard the commotion. They pressed against the observation windows, staring at the human who wouldn't die. And Thorn, exhausted and still covered in his own blood, looked at the gathering audience and sighed. "Great," he muttered. "I'm a circus attraction. This is exactly how I wanted to spend my rotation." But Dr. HumanException wasn't listening. He was already pulling up every piece of medical literature on Terrans he could find, determined to understand how this impossibility was sitting on his operating table asking about insurance deductibles. This, he decided, was going to require consultation with the station's most experienced physician, someone who had seen everything the galaxy had to offer, someone who might actually have answers. He reached for his communicator, already composing the message. "Dr. Nimbathor, I need your expertise, immediately. I have a patient who appears to have forgotten how dying works." Dr. Nimbathor arrived like a walking chandelier having an existential crisis. The crystalline physician stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body composed of interlocking geometric structures that refracted light into patterns that hurt to look at directly. He was old, ancient, really, and had spent the last 200 years treating species that most medical students only read about in historical texts. If anyone had seen something like this before, it would be him. He glided into the observation room where Thorn sat on an examination table, now wearing a medical gown and looking thoroughly annoyed with existence. "So," Nimbathor's voice resonated like wind chimes in a cathedral, "you are the human who has confused our equipment." "Your equipment confused itself," Thorn replied. "I just showed up bleeding." Nimbathor's crystalline structure shifted, rotating to examine Thorn from multiple angles simultaneously. "Dr. HumanException has shared the readings with me. Quite remarkable. Your cellular regeneration rate exceeds anything I have encountered in my considerable career." "Is that your way of saying I'm special?" Thorn asked. "Because my mother used to say that, and it was never a compliment." "I have treated members of the Regeneration species," Nimbathor continued, ignoring the sarcasm. "Their biology allows complete limb regrowth over several months. I have worked with Plutonian phase shifters who can temporarily accelerate their healing through meditation. But this," he gestured at the now absent wound, This violates every principle of energy conservation I understand. Where is your body obtaining the resources to heal this quickly? Spite, Thorne suggested. Stubbornness? A really aggressive survival instinct? Halminox, who had been hovering nearby with the enthusiasm of a student at his first autopsy, clicked his mandibles. We need comprehensive testing. Blood work, tissue samples, bone density analysis, genetic sequencing. I want to map every aspect of his biology. Going to need consent for that, Thorne said, crossing his arms. You have a collapsed lung on record from 16 hours ago, Halminox pointed out. You currently have 2 fully functional lungs. I would think you'd be interested in understanding why. Thorne considered this. Fair point. Fine. Poke and prod away. But I'm billing you for my time if this takes more than 3 hours. It took 9 hours. They ran every test the station had available. Blood samples revealed nothing unusual. Standard human hemoglobin, normal platelet count, unremarkable white blood cell activity. Tissue samples showed regular cellular structure. Bone density was actually slightly below average for human standards. The genetic sequencing came back completely ordinary, matching the standard Terran baseline with minor variations that fell well within normal population distribution. This makes no sense, Halminox muttered, staring at the results displayed across multiple screens. There's nothing here. No enhanced cellular structures, no specialized healing organs, no genetic markers for advanced regeneration. According to every test we have, you're a completely average human. Told you, Thorne said through a mouthful of the sandwich Bupix had brought him. I'm aggressively normal. Just ask my ex. But average humans don't heal like this, Nimbathor chimed in, his crystalline body refracting the screen light into rainbow patterns. I have treated humans before. Broken bones took weeks to mend. Lacerations required sutures and time. You are healing from catastrophic trauma in hours. Thorne swallowed his bite. Look, I don't know what to tell you. This is just what happens. I fell into a plasma reactor once. 3rd degree burns over 60% of my body. Hurt like hell. Looked like a barbecued disaster for about a week. Then I was fine. Thought that was normal until other species started freaking out about it. A plasma reactor, Halminox repeated flatly. There was an incident with a space bear on Arcturus 9, Thorne continued. Thing literally ate me, like swallowed me whole. I had to cut my way out from the inside. Took about 20 minutes. You were eaten by a predator. Nimbathor's voice took on a harmonics that suggested deep concern. And you survived by performing self-extraction from within its digestive system. The bear didn't survive, Thorne clarified. Turns out human stomach acid doesn't play nice with their internal biology. Who knew? Halminox was now pacing, his 6 limbs moving in agitated patterns. This doesn't align with human medical literature. I've reviewed the files. Humans are documented as moderately fragile, prone to injury, susceptible to disease and environmental hazards. Oh, we are, Thorne agreed. We're absolutely terrible at not getting hurt. We just happen to be really good at not staying hurt. It's like, okay, imagine if you built a ship out of paper, but the paper constantly repaired itself every time it got damaged. Still paper. Still shouldn't work. But it does. By now, word had spread throughout the entire station. The medical bay's observation gallery was packed with students, researchers, and physicians from a dozen different species, all crowding to catch a glimpse of the impossible human. Someone had started a betting pool on what injury he could survive. The current favorite was explosive decompression. I feel like a zoo exhibit, Thorne grumbled, noticing the crowd. You are significantly more interesting than a zoo exhibit, Nimbathur replied. Zoo exhibits are explainable. Halminox had moved to a terminal in the corner, his limbs flying across multiple keyboards simultaneously. I'm accessing the medical archives, cross-referencing historical records. There must be something. Previous cases, documented incidents, anything that explains this. He searched for 30 minutes, digging through centuries of medical documentation. And then, buried in an obscure file from a frontier medical outpost dated nearly 100 years ago, he found something. Here, he said quietly, a report from a mining colony. Human workers survived a tunnel collapse, was buried for 5 days without food or water. When rescuers found him, he was alive and healing from multiple fractures. The attending physician noted, Terran physiology continues to baffle standard diagnostic approaches. There's more, Nimbathur said, his form brightening as he accessed another terminal. A military medical log. Human soldier exposed to vacuum for 90 seconds during a hull breach. Survived with minimal intervention. Report notes, unexpected resilience to environmental extremes. Halminox pulled up another file, then another. A pattern emerged, scattered reports across decades, different locations, different incidents. Humans surviving things they shouldn't survive. Healing faster than expected. Recovering from injuries that should have been fatal. Nobody compiled this data, Halminox said, his voice filled with equal parts wonder and frustration. These are isolated reports. No comprehensive study, no centralized database. Because, Thorne said, finishing his sandwich, humans are boring, right? We don't have natural weapons. We're not particularly strong. We can't breathe underwater or see in the dark. We're just, he shrugged, we're just humans. Why would anyone bother studying the unremarkable species? Nimbathor's crystalline structure pulsed thoughtfully. An oversight. A significant one. So what now? Thorne asked. You write a paper? Publish findings? Make me medical famous? Before anyone could answer, the observation room doors slammed open with enough force to dent the walls. Standing in the doorway was something that looked like it had been designed by a committee of nightmares. Captain Moxilan stood nearly 9 feet tall, his body covered in interlocking armor plates that weren't decorative. They were biological. His species, the Braxians, had evolved for one purpose, warfare, and he was looking directly at Thorne. I hear, Mox Helan's voice rumbled like rocks grinding together. There is a human here who cannot be killed. The observation room went silent in the way that spaces do when something large and violent enters them. Captain Moxilan filled the doorway like a natural disaster waiting to happen, his armor plates shifting with hydraulic precision as he moved. Behind him, 3 smaller Braxian soldiers stood at attention, their weapons clearly visible despite station regulations about armed visitors in medical facilities. Administrator Ormbathu materialized from somewhere in the back of the crowd, his scales flushing to a pale yellow that indicated either fear or intense bureaucratic disapproval. Possibly both. Captain Moxilan, Ormbathu said, with the forced pleasantness of someone addressing a bomb, this is a medical facility. We have strict protocols about— I am not here for your protocols, Moxilan interrupted, his eyes never leaving Thorne. I am here for the human. Thorne, still sitting on the examination table in a medical gown that definitely didn't cover enough, raised one hand in a lazy wave. Hi, I'm the human. Specifically, I'm a human who would very much like to not be here for whatever you're here for. You survived a impalement through your vital organs, Moxilan stated, taking a step into the room. The floor actually creaked under his weight. You healed in hours what should take months. My intelligence network is very thorough. Your intelligence network needs a hobby, Thorn replied. Maybe knitting. I hear knitting is calming. Halminox moved to position himself between Thorn and the Braxian captain, which was either brave or suicidal depending on your perspective. Captain, this patient is under medical observation. Whatever you want can wait until— It cannot wait. Mox Helan cut him off. I represent the Braxian Mercenary Coalition. We are always seeking exceptional warriors. A human who cannot be killed is exactly what we need. I can absolutely be killed, Thorn said quickly. Super killable. Extremely mortal. I just heal fast, which is not the same thing as immortal. Big difference. Difference enough, Moxilan rumbled. A soldier who can recover from battlefield injuries in hours instead of months is worth 100 normal soldiers. Nimbathor's crystalline structure pulsed with light, drawing attention. Captain Moxilan, I must inform you that this human is not military property. He is a civilian cargo hauler with no combat training or martial affiliation. That can be corrected, Moxilan said. We have excellent training facilities. Yeah, that's gonna be a hard pass from me, buddy, Thorn said, sliding off the examination table. Standing up didn't make him any more intimidating next to the 9-foot battle monster, but it felt better than sitting. I haul cargo. Sometimes I haul weird cargo that tries to eat me or explode. That's excitement enough. I am not asking. Moxilan took another step forward. And I'm not going, Thorn replied, his voice losing its casual tone. So we've reached what you might call an impasse. The room's tension ratcheted up approximately 6 notches. Bupix had turned a shade of purple so dark it was nearly black, which translated roughly to, someone calls security before this becomes a homicide. Several of the medical students in the observation gallery had started quietly backing toward the exits. Halminox, demonstrating either exceptional courage or a complete lack of survival instinct, stepped fully in front of Thorn. Captain, remove yourself from this facility immediately, or I will have station security escort you out. Moxilan laughed, which sounded like boulders having a conversation. Your security? I passed 6 of them on my way here. They will not stop me. Maybe not, came a new voice from the doorway. But I will. Everyone turned. Standing behind Moxilan's soldiers was someone who looked like they'd been assembled from spare parts and bad decisions. The newcomer was humanoid, roughly 7 feet tall, with cybernetic enhancements covering 40% of their visible body. Their right arm was entirely mechanical. Their left eye glowed with targeting software, and their expression suggested they'd run out of patience several years ago and never bothered to restock. Who are you? Mox Helan demanded. Station Security Chief Horville, the cyborg replied, and you're in violation of about 15 different regulations right now, starting with no armed militants in medical facilities and ending with threatening patients makes me personally irritable. I have diplomatic credentials, Moxilan said, though he sounded less certain now. Diplomatic credentials don't mean you can recruit people by force, Horville countered. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. Your soldiers are going to leave. And if I see you back here without an appointment and proper clearance, I'm going to introduce you to our detention facilities. They're not comfortable. For a long moment, Moxilan stared at the security chief. Then, with visible reluctance, he took a step back. This is not over, human. My coalition will be in contact. Please don't, Thorn called, as the Braxian captain and his soldiers filed out. I'm really not interested. Like, aggressively not interested. Once they were gone, Horville nodded to the medical staff and departed without another word, leaving behind the kind of silence that follows near disasters. "Well," Thorn said eventually, "that was moderately terrifying." "This is precisely what I was afraid of," Ormbathu hissed, his scales flushing through several colors in rapid succession. "Once word spreads about your capabilities, every military organization in 6 sectors will want you. This station will become a recruitment battlefield." "Not if we publish first," Halminuk said suddenly, his mandibles clicking with excitement. "If we document Thorn's abilities properly, establish him as a research subject rather than a military asset." "I'm right here," Thorn interrupted, "still able to hear you making plans about my body without asking." Halminox turned to him. "Apologies. But Thorn, consider this. If we publish comprehensive medical findings, you become a scientific curiosity rather than a weapon. Much harder to recruit someone who's in every medical journal in the galaxy." "And how exactly does that help me?" Thorn asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like I trade being hunted by mercenaries for being hunted by researchers." "We could offer compensation," Ormbathu interjected, seeing an opportunity. "Full medical coverage for life at any station in our network. Waive your current medical bill?" "Which I'm assuming is astronomical," Thorn said. "Which is indeed substantial," Ormbathu admitted. "Plus a stipend for your time participating in our study." Nimbathor's crystalline form chimed thoughtfully. "There is also the matter of understanding your biology. You claim this healing is normal for humans, but the medical literature suggests otherwise. Do you not wish to know why you are different?" "I'm not different," Thorn protested. "I'm just... Okay, look, I know I keep saying this, but humans heal. It's what we do. Maybe not all at the same speed, maybe some are better at it than others, but we heal. We survive. It's literally our entire evolutionary strategy." "Elaborate," Nimbathor requested. Thorn ran a hand through his hair, thinking. "All right, so, Earth. You know about Earth, right? The planet that has hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, tsunamis, and weather patterns that actively try to murder you?" "We are familiar," Halminox said dryly. "It is classified as a Class 9 death world in our databases." "Right, Class 9, which means everything there is trying to kill everything else. The plants are poisonous, the animals are predators, the microorganisms cause diseases, even the weather wants you dead. And humans," Thorn spread his hands, "humans evolved there, in that. We didn't develop venom or claws or armored hides. We developed persistence, stubbornness, and really, really aggressive healing factors. A death world origin would explain enhanced durability," Nimbathor mused, "but this level of regeneration is what happens when you spend 1,000,000 years getting eaten by things and deciding you're not done yet," Thorn finished. "Look, you want a theory? Here's my theory. Humans evolved to refuse to die. We're not stronger than most species. We're not faster. We don't have better senses. But we keep getting back up. That's our thing. That's what makes us human. We're too stubborn to quit. And our biology evolved to match our attitude." Halminox was silent for a long moment, processing this. Actually, that makes a disturbing amount of sense." "It's spite-based biology," Thorn said with a shrug. "We evolved to be annoying." "I want to test this theory," Halminox said suddenly. "Properly, systematically. Not just injury recovery, toxin resistance, environmental tolerance, stress responses. If humans truly evolved this level of durability, it should be consistent across multiple threat categories." "You want to poison me and freeze me and see what happens," Thorn translated. "In a controlled, monitored, completely safe environment," Halminox added quickly. With full consent and compensation. Thorn looked at Ormbathu. How much compensation are we talking? Medical bill waived, lifetime coverage, and, Ormbathu calculated quickly, 20,000 credits. 30,000, Thorn countered. And you publish under my name, too. If I'm going to be famous, I want credit. 25,000 and co-authorship, Ormbathu offered. Thorn considered this. Outside, through the observation windows, he could see station security taking up positions. Mox Hyland might be gone, but the threat wasn't. If every military organization in the galaxy decided he was valuable, he'd spend the rest of his life running. But if he was just a well-documented medical phenomenon, that might actually be safer. Fine, Thorn said finally. But nothing that causes permanent damage, nothing that risks actual death. And if anything feels wrong, we stop immediately. Agreed, Halminox said, already pulling up, testing protocols on his datapad. Agreed, Nimbather chimed. Agreed, Ormbathu added, probably already calculating the publicity value. Thorn sighed, looking at the ceiling. I'm going to regret this, aren't I? Probably, Halminox said cheerfully. But science thanks you for your contribution. Science better buy me dinner first, Thorn muttered. The testing began within the hour. The testing took place in Laboratory 5, which had been hastily converted into what Thorn privately called the torture chamber, but medical. Halminox had assembled a team of specialists, each eager to poke at the human who refused to follow biological rules. Nimbather supervised with the detached interest of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything, yet was being surprised anyway. Test 1 involved breaking Thorn's left pinky finger. This feels excessive, Thorn said, watching Halminox position the medical fracture device. It's the smallest bone we can break with minimal complications, Halminox replied. And according to standard medical charts, human finger bones take approximately 3 to 4 weeks to heal. Ready? No, Thorn said, but do it anyway. The crack was audible. So was Thorn's cursing, which introduced several medical students to human profanity they'd never encountered in linguistic databases. Halminox immediately began scanning, recording, measuring. The crowd in the observation gallery leaned forward collectively. 6 hours later, the bone had completely healed. Not mostly healed, completely. New calcium deposits had formed, fused, and solidified in a time frame that made Halminox's mandibles click so rapidly it sounded like applause. Impossible, Halminox whispered, which had become his catchphrase. Can we please use a different word? Thorn asked, flexing his finger experimentally. That one's getting old. Test 2 involved toxins, specifically a Voltaxian poison that caused complete respiratory paralysis in most carbon-based life forms. They administered a carefully measured dose, enough to test tolerance, not enough to actually kill, and waited. Thorn hiccuped. That's it? Bupix vibrated, her color shifting to confused orange. Just hiccups? They're really annoying hiccups, Thorn protested, hiccuping again to prove the point. My diaphragm feels like it's having an argument with itself. They wore off in 20 minutes. Blood tests showed the toxin had been metabolized and eliminated so efficiently that Nimbather spent 30 minutes recalibrating the equipment, convinced it was malfunctioning. It wasn't. Test 3 pushed Thorn through temperature extremes. Cold that would freeze most species solid. Heat that would denature proteins in normal organisms. Thorn found both uncomfortable but survivable. He compared the cold chamber to a bad morning in northern Canada and the heat chamber to summer in literally any human city. Your species lives in these conditions voluntarily? Halminox asked, horrified. We call it weather, Thorn replied. Sometimes we even go outside in it for fun. Test 4 involved tissue regeneration speed. They made a small incision on Thorn's forearm, just deep enough to require stitches under normal circumstances, and watched it close in real time. The medical students took notes so frantically that several broke their writing instruments. By the 9th hour, even Thorn was getting tired. How many more tests are we doing? Because I'm starting to feel less like a research subject and more like a stress toy. Just a few more, Halminox promised, though his definition of a few was clearly different from Thorn's. We need comprehensive data to... The laboratory doors exploded inward. Not opened, not unlocked, exploded. The reinforced metal crumpled like paper as Captain Moxilan strode through, flanked by 8 Braxian soldiers, all armed with weapons that hummed with barely contained violence. Security Chief Horval was on the ground behind them, unconscious but still breathing. His cybernetic arm sparked uselessly. Your station security, Mox Hylan announced, was insufficient. Ormbathu, who had been observing from a safe distance, immediately began backing toward the emergency exit. This is a neutral station. You cannot... I can, Mox Hylan interrupted. And I am. The human comes with me now. Halminox moved to block Mox Hylan's path again, demonstrating either exceptional bravery or a fundamental misunderstanding of his own physical limitations. You are not taking my patient. Your patient, Mox Hylan said, almost gently, is now a military asset. Step aside, Doctor, or be moved aside. Nimbathor's crystalline structure pulsed with warning colors. Captain, you are making a significant mistake. The diplomatic ramifications will be handled by people who get paid more than me, Mox Hylan finished. My orders are simple. Acquire the regenerating human. I am acquiring the regenerating human. Thorn, still in his medical gown and covered in monitoring equipment, raised his hand like a student asking permission to speak. Hey, quick question. What happens if I refuse? You will be sedated and transported, Mox Hylan stated matter-of-factly. I would prefer your cooperation, but it is not required. Right, Thorn said, nodding slowly. So basically, you're kidnapping me. I am recruiting you aggressively. Pretty sure that's just kidnapping with better PR, Thorn replied. He looked around the laboratory. Medical staff pressed against the walls, students frozen in fear, Bupix vibrating so violently she was nearly invisible. Then he looked back at Mox Hylan. Okay, how about this? You want to know if I'm worth recruiting? Let's run a test. Mox Hylan's armor plates shifted with interest. What kind of test? A demonstration, Thorn said, stepping away from the examination table. You shoot me somewhere non-fatal. I heal. You decide if that's really what you want in your army. The room went silent except for Halminox's mandibles clicking in rapid distress. Thorn, no, that's... Honestly, the least painful thing I've done today. Thorn interrupted. I've already been broken, poisoned, frozen, and sliced. What's one more injury? He turned back to Mox Hylan. But here's the deal. If I survive, when I survive, you leave. You tell your coalition that humans aren't worth the diplomatic incident. Deal? Mox Hylan studied him for a long moment. You would volunteer to be shot. I volunteer to prove a point, Thorn corrected. The point being that I'm a terrible soldier. So, yeah, shoot me. Somewhere that won't kill me immediately, please. I'm thinking, shoulder? Shoulder's good. Lots of meat, not too many vital bits. This is insane, Halminox hissed. This is Tuesday, Thorn replied. which still wasn't correct, but was becoming his personal philosophy. He looked at Mox Hylan. "So, you want a demonstration or not?" Mox Hylan drew his sidearm, a plasma weapon that glowed with enough energy to punch through ship hull. "You are certain?" "Not even a little bit," Thorn admitted. "But let's do it anyway." "Thorn, I must strenuously object," Nimbather began. "Objection noted," Thorn said, signing a digital waiver that Ormbathu had frantically pulled up on a datapad. "Okay, Captain. Do your worst." Moxilan aimed, fired. The plasma bolt hit Thorn's left shoulder with enough force to spin him halfway around. The smell of burned flesh filled the laboratory immediately. Thorn screamed, a genuinely pained, entirely human sound, and dropped to one knee, clutching the wound with his other hand. "Pain receptors functioning normally," he gasped. That's really unfortunate for me right now." But he didn't fall down. Despite the hole in his shoulder, despite the visible bone, despite the catastrophic tissue damage, Thorn stayed on his feet. Or rather, on one foot and one knee, but conscious, aware. Already, impossibly, the wound was beginning to close. "You see that?" Thorn managed through gritted teeth. "That's healing, right there, starting already." He looked up at Moxilan, tears streaming down his face from pain, but eyes still defiant. "Now, your turn." "My turn?" Moxilan's confusion was evident. "Your turn," Thorn repeated. He reached out with his good arm, the wound already closing enough that blood had stopped flowing, and grabbed Moxilan's sidearm from his holster before the captain could react. "You wanted to know what I can survive. Now, let's see what you can survive." He shot Mox Hylan in the exact same spot. Left shoulder. Same weapon. Same settings. The Braxian captain dropped like a building being demolished. He didn't cry out. His species didn't vocalize pain the same way. But his armor plates locked in a defensive configuration as he collapsed. His soldiers immediately raised their weapons, but Moxilan raised his good arm, stopping them. From the ground, bleeding and clearly in shock, Mox Hylan stared up at Thorn. "You shot me." "I shot you exactly how you shot me," Thorn replied, swaying slightly but still standing. "And here's the thing, Captain. In about 30 minutes I'll be fine. My shoulder will heal. I'll have a scar for maybe a week. Then nothing. How long until you're fine?" Mox Hylan didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He was already losing consciousness from pain and shock. "Your species has natural armor," Thorn continued, addressing the other Braxian soldiers now. "You're stronger than humans, faster, better senses, better weapons. You're engineered for combat. And I still shot your captain with his own gun while bleeding from the same injury. You know why? Because humans don't stop. We don't quit. We just keep going until the problem is solved or we're dead. And even then, we're annoying about it." One of the soldiers moved to help their captain. Thorn didn't stop them. "So, here's my answer about recruitment," Thorn said, his shoulder now visibly knitting back together, muscle fibers reconnecting in ways that made several medical students faint. "No, I'm not joining your coalition. I'm not becoming a weapon. Because the thing that makes humans dangerous isn't that we heal fast. It's that we're stubborn, creative, and we fight dirty when we have to. You can't train that. You can't control it. And you definitely can't recruit it by force." He handed the plasma weapon to Halminox, who took it with trembling limbs. "Now get your captain to medical," Thorn said to the remaining soldiers. "I assume you have your own facilities. And tell your coalition that humans are more trouble than we're worth." The Braxians carried their captain out, weapons holstered, retreat acknowledged. Thorn watched them go, then finally allowed himself to sit down heavily on the floor. Okay, he said, to no one in particular. That hurt significantly more than I thought it would. Halminox rushed over with medical supplies, though the wound was already mostly closed. That was the most recklessly suicidal thing I have ever witnessed. Really? Thorne asked. Because I've done worse. There was this time on Beetlejuice 4. Please stop, Nimbather interrupted, his crystalline form pulsing with what might have been respect. My understanding of biology has been sufficiently traumatized for one rotation. Ormbathu, who had hidden behind a cabinet during the entire confrontation, finally emerged. The medical bill is waived, as agreed, Thorne reminded him. Plus 30,000 credits and co-authorship on the paper. We had a deal. 25,000, Ormbathu countered weakly. 30, Thorne said firmly. I got shot. That's worth the extra 5. Ormbathu's scales shifted through several colors before settling on resigned agreement. 30,000 credits. 3 days later, Thorne was cleared to leave. The wound had healed completely, leaving only the faintest scar that would probably disappear within a week. Halminox had compiled his findings into a comprehensive paper titled Terran Regenerative Capabilities, a study in biological stubbornness, which was already generating significant interest in medical communities across 12 sectors. As Thorne prepared to depart, Halminox walked him to the docking bay. One question before you go, the insectoid doctor said. You mentioned you were on the lower end for human healing capabilities. Was that truth or exaggeration? Thorne grinned. Complete truth. You should see what athletes can do. Or soldiers. Or kids, honestly. Kids are basically indestructible until you tell them to be careful. Then, they immediately break something. Halminox's mandibles clicked in what might have been horror. Remind me never to visit Earth. Probably wise, Thorne agreed. We've got drop bears. What are drop bears? Exactly, Thorne said, leaving the doctor to contemplate that mystery. He boarded his ship, filed his flight plan, and departed Infinite Mercy with 30,000 credits, lifetime medical coverage, and a minor reputation as the human who proved biology was more suggestions than rules. Behind him, Dr. Halminox returned to his laboratory, looked at all the impossible data, and began composing a message to the Galactic Medical Association. The subject line read, "We need to talk about humans." And across the galaxy, physicians began realizing that humanity wasn't just another species. They were the universe's most annoying survivors, not through strength or speed or superior technology, but through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to accept death as an answer. The galaxy would never quite look at humans the same way again. And somewhere in the depths of space, Thorne whistled to himself and wondered what cargo run would try to kill him next week.